Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 253 of Retropower Uncut. And we start with the E-Type, which is progressing pretty well. It's the job list is reducing. The job list is reducing quite rapidly. Still a lot to do, and it's still at that stage where every job knocked off yields probably one more, not two more anymore. But we are making pretty good progress. As you can see, there is a dash resting and nestling in here. I've only just thrown that in again just for the benefit of you viewers, because Scott had actually taken it back out to do some other things. But basically, Scott has been working on getting this correctly mounted, trimmed to fit around everything, and able to be bolted in, and to a stage where he could start work on the dash top, which we're making in aluminium. And that's pretty much the crux of the operation. In slightly more detail, this is being bolted to brackets at each end. We were thinking about adding a structural piece across the top to support it, but the carbon is so stiff and strong that it doesn't really warrant any extra support. I'm not going to try and lean on it too hard now because it's not really bolted in, but it's incredibly stiff. So there's just no point really adding any further structure to that. We're going to add some braces that support the top here back to the upper dash, which will also function as supports for some fasteners that retain the dash top. So they're called fast mount fasteners, which are a push to latch and pull to release sort of self-locking fastener that we're going to use to fix on the dash top. In the background I can hear thunder. It is raining very hard at the moment. It's making up for pretty much 2 months of no rain in one day, I think, at the moment. So yes, back to cars and not weather. Yeah, basically the dash is going to bolt in with 2 brackets at the end, which Scott has made. Some brackets further down on the transmission tunnel, which he's made. He's had all that bolted in. And then the next phase is making the dash top and the mountings for that. That's awaiting a couple of other things, which I believe are being done in conjunction with the CAD guys, but basically mounting lots of ancillary parts and mounting some of the upper dash parts, which I'm going to let Luke talk to you about in a little bit, because I think Luke's going to talk about the upper dash stuff as he designed it all. So that's the dash area. Moving on from that, Scott's finished off the plumbing basically as far as he can. The only bit that's left to do, the only things left to do are the final couple of details on the auto transmission cooler lines, which we can't do with the exhaust in place, and we don't want to take the exhaust off just yet, and the final details on the AC lines, which again necessitate removal of various things which currently we don't want to remove. But they're pretty minor things. The actual only detailed differences we've got to put on the car are a couple of threaded bosses that need making and brazing into the front of the chassis. So that's pretty minor stuff. Other than that, the coolant lines are all done, the heater lines are done. Scott's been doing some work on the bulkhead, getting the HVAC bulkhead fittings fitted and the holes welded up, the unnecessary holes welded up and the bulkhead tidied up down there. He's got all that done. That's all looking pretty good. I think that's pretty much it on the bulkhead side of things, and it's all looking, yeah, it's all coming together quite well. Not vast swathes of other stuff, it's just all this little detail work, lots and lots and lots of areas of detail work. One of the next phases to do will be the routing for the wiring loom, which I know Scott's going to be looking at in conjunction with Adam and probably Steve possibly, I think, but working out where the wiring loom is going to be running through and its passageway through from the tubes that we put into the sills to carry the loom through into the rear passenger area, or not passenger area, but what would be the rear seat area, and through into the boot area. So there's a bit of work to be done there and some final things to be done on that. And then the other part is working on the bonnet to get the bonnet to this. Oh, hang on, I've missed a piece. I've just seen it here. He has the air conditioning on the going back to the HVAC. I totally forgot. He's got the HVAC condenser, the air conditioning condenser mounted now as well, which we received from Fen Air. And that is now mounted on the front. That fits perfectly. The tube fittings fit through perfectly in the gap that we've got left, and they mount. We've got just exactly right amount of room for the pipes. Basically, everything's fallen into place as well as it possibly could with that. So Thank you Fenair for supplying that. That works perfectly. Everything's going to work nicely there. Moving back on to what I was just talking about, which is the bonnet. We have this section which was an add-in piece that we had made to modify the bonnet to give us the mounting areas where the bonnet fits to the rest of the hinges which attach it to the front end part of the chassis. Now, when that was done, some assumptions were made, and we've had to make a little adjustment. We basically run out of fore and aft adjustment on those hinges. Now, we could remake the hinges, but we'd rather not, or we'd rather start from a more sensible point in terms of the adjustment. So these clamps are currently holding on some epoxy panel bond, some epoxy adhesive, which is gluing on these two pieces of tooling board, some epoxy tooling board. We're actually adding some epoxy tooling board spacers into the mould, which will then be blended in and smoothed out. But they're adding an offset into the mould to give us more adjustment on the bonnet, some more fore and aft adjustment, because as I say, at the moment we were at the very aft end of the adjustment, and at that point we were still a little bit wide on the bonnet gap. So we're just giving ourselves some more adjustment. These cars had a lot of shim adjustment on the bonnets from the factory, and they were generally shimmed both up and down and fore and aft, to the tune of, I've seen cars with at least 5/8 of an inch in both planes added, and at the moment we were in with 0 spacers on the fore and aft adjustment. So by adding some material into the mould, we put a backwards offset into the mould, which will then give us a chance to have some fore and aft adjustment via shims again, and rather than being completely maxed out on our rearward adjustment. So that's where we're at on all of that. Progressing well, basically, and we're on all the nitty-gritty detail stuff. So there's a bit going on the CAD front, which, as I say, I'll let the CAD guys talk about that. There's no point me talking about it. But things are coming. We're very, very, very close to the finish of dry build. The other section we've got to do is some wheel mock-up using the mock-up hub that I mentioned the other day. So we're going to build that into an upright assembly and get that all sorted out so that we can check the offsets required, so we can get the information over to Dayton in the States to build the wheels for this car. So yeah, that's where we're at on E-Type. I think that sums it up fairly well. It's all nitty-gritty stuff, not very photogenic stuff, lots of detail work. It's at that stage where the whole process does drag on a little bit for not immense visual reward, but bear with us, we're pretty much getting there on it now. Lurking over in the background in its native habitat of a workshop, you can see my wife's really, L322 Range Rover, which is in for some miserable work that I was trying to get done on it the other evening, and it's stranded because I'm short of a CV gator. Having trashed a CV gator on it, changing the front struts, having to employ a bit of heat to release things. I might have slightly scorched a CV gator, so I'm awaiting a CV gator to put that back together, so we've actually got the family wagon back up and running again. But anyway, ignore that in the background. Onto the Saab, and I'm going to hand over to Bobby to talk about this because he's better placed than me to talk about it, and it would be nice to hear from somebody other than me. So over to Bobby.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Saab's heaven. So pretty much what I've done is completed all the sound system installation, the hardware of it at least. So last week I finished the rear seat quarter speakers, mounting for them and all that. So what I've done this week is we got the 5x7 speakers, so I had something to measure off of. So I fabricate these pieces here where the speaker is going to mount, and then on top of that it's going to have the trim panels and all that. Yeah, so these two bits, then we decided to go for the active subwoofer, which was exact dimension just to fit in here. James got footage, so it's bolting in here on that panel. Obviously, being an active subwoofer, you want this to be mounted to something which is part of the chassis, so you can transmit the vibrations, the bass. Yeah, so I had to create a couple reinforcement plates because the inner skin of the Saab is probably 1.2 mil, I think. So yes, I wanted something solid. So create the mounting for this, and then we're also using an amplifier for the rest of the speakers, because we've got 2, 4, 6 big speakers and the tweeters. So we need an amp for all of them. So the amp I managed to squeeze in between the chassis like here and the active subwoofer, and with enough space in the back and in the front, so there's air circulation. And once we have the finished panel here, we're going to have also a speaker hole of some sort with a mesh, so that's going to let more air in to cool the active subwoofer and amp. But yeah, so pretty much we went for a focal active subwoofer and 6.5 inches on the rear seat cards. Then for the doors and for the 5x7s on the parcel shelf pods, we went for Morel. The doors are the Morel, the Nano, I think they call them. They're very, very slim. So again, 6.5 inches for the doors, but they're very slim. They're about 40 mil, I think, front to back face, front to the magnet, from the front to the magnet, which is ideal door speaker if you're struggling with space. We use the same ones for the Lexus. And then yeah, so Morel again, the rear parcel shelf speakers, and I think the amp is Audison. Yes, so that's going to be very, very nice sound setup in that car, just to beat the engine noise and long travels. But yeah, that's for me, and I'll see you next week.
See you later. Look at that weapon of a man.
So thank you, Bobby, and without further ado, we're going to go that way and look at some Munich metal and have a little talk about what Stu has been doing on here. Walk past his wing support flags here. Two-pronged attack really on this. One was front wing fitment, following on from all of the talk about the cooler pack and the things to do with that we did last week. He's moved on to getting the front wings to fit a bit better. One of the issues we had was the wing to bonnet gap was a little bit wide. We don't really know why. Not a lot wrong with the bonnet as far as we could see, but the wing to bonnet gap was quite wide. I think looking at pictures of these cars, they were pretty variable from the factory. It would certainly make sense. They were built by Carman, not exactly known for their accurate panel gap control, so that's quite possible. And the front wing fitment on these is very, very odd anyway. If anybody's ever worked on one, they were fitted in a very bizarre way anyway. These are currently not solidly fitted, but the problem Stu was having was actually getting that bonnet gap to close up. Now, we could lead the aperture on the inside edge of the wings, but it's very difficult on these because they have basically bird beaks all the way along, as we would call them, as reinforcers to stop the wing twisting. Due to the unique way that the wing is mounted, they had to be added to prevent the wing sagging, I believe. So it's very hard to lead down there. It would be quite time consuming to lead down there. And also, that's not really how we'd want to start adjusting the panel gaps given the choice. So the next stage was to have a go at trying to pull the wings further inboard, and that's what that contraption that Stu has attached to the top of the wings is. He's basically set that up so that it's a big tension strut which is welded to the top edge of the wing here. So he's welded this strip to each wing, set up this tension bar all the way across so that he can wind tension onto that and pull these wings inboard. Now there's no tension on it now because he's put the screws in to retain the wing where he pulled it to. But he's basically pulled the wings in using that, which has stretched them over the ends of this scuttle panel, and that's actually got the wing gaps to the bonnet much better and much more in line now with, I mean, they were fairly well lined up with the door anyway, but it's got them a lot better in terms of relationship with the door now. So that's a big step forward, that's a big improvement. The next step beyond that was then to look at the doors. Now, we found that the transit paint was extremely non-adherent on these doors, so that's been removed. That'll be removed from the outside, but more importantly, prior to that, it was removed from the inside. These doors have now been painted on the inside to protect them from corrosion, so Stu can now get these skins fitted to the doors, which is what he's working on at the moment. He's now, by the looks of it, he's he's got this one clinched around the door frame, and I think he's just working on the other one, wherever that may be. He's going to be on the brink of getting the second door skin fitted to the door. Once he's got these done, he can get all the edge conditions set nicely, and then he can finalise the wing position to match with the door and match with the quarter panel, make sure all the panel alignment's good. Then the wings will be ready to go on. At that point, we're going to take the wings off, clean the inside of the wings the same as we did with the door, DA those, get them back to bare metal all over the inside and get them coated on the inside so that they won't corrode. And then we're also going to coat the inner wing at the back part of the inner wing, where we're not going to be able to get into spray coating on it after the wings are fitted. We're going to get that coated first, and then we'll fit the wings for the final time and weld them on. And then all the front panel arrangement can be done, all the alignment over here can be done, all these gaps can be set, and all this weld has to go down here because all of this is welded together. Other than that bit around there, all of this is welded together. So once all of that's done, all of those alignments can be set, everything can be set exactly in line with clamps, little blocks tacked on, whatever we need to do to get all of that alignment bang on, and then that can all be welded fully in place at the front. And that'll be a good position to be in. On the rear of this car, we are still awaiting dampers, which again doesn't surprise me. When we've got the dampers for the rear from Nitron, we can then set to on the structural fabrication on the rear of the car, and once the rear structural fabrication is done, then we can move on to putting the quarter panels on. But until that point, we're not putting Stu doesn't want to fix the quarters on until the inner arch tubs are all complete, which is a wise thing. So yes, good progress on all of that. The next phase, I think, once this is done, if we don't have the rear dampers, still be moving on to the bulkhead, where we've got a loose plan. We know we've got an engine to accommodate, so that's fine. We're going with a pendulum mount type pedal box. I believe we're going to use a tilt and pendulum mount type pedal box, and a remote servo is the plan on this car. Probably with a remote servo in the boot area, I would imagine, although we're going to sort of review the options on that, but it will probably end up in the boot area. But yeah, that's pretty much a roundup on where we're at with the E9. It's all looking pretty good, coming together nicely. It's nice to build a relatively simple car in the mix. So yes, it's still quite a lot of work, and we're still doing a few changes, but it's fairly conventional compared to some of the other work around us, as you will have no doubt noticed. In a short while, we'll be introducing another car, which is actually even more conventional, but we'll come on to that in a minute. Prior to that, we'll have a little look at the Aston Martin. This is going well. I've had a message from Claire at ASR to say that the bonnet is done, which is great service. That's very, very good news that Sean's finished sorting the bonnet out. So we now have a bonnet inner, a bonnet outer, ready to bond together. But we'll get that picked up hopefully next week once we've paid for it. Get that dropped onto the car, and then we can use that to align the front end. We can use that to do all the sorting out of the front then. Once we've got that bonnet, we can then use that to align everything correctly, because one of the major steps forward that we need to make now is fitting the inner front panel that mounts all the headlights and everything. And as I mentioned before, this front corner of the aluminium panel work on this car is bent, and the inner front panel originally was bent. We need to get the new front panel that came from ASR mounted nice and square and straight, and then we can mount the aluminium panel work to it. But to position all of that, we need a bonnet. So once we've got the bonnet back, we can start on alignment of all the front end. So that's an exciting time. Luke has been busy doing CAD work around the bulkhead, which I've no doubt he'll tell you about, but that's enabled us to develop the bulkhead area a little bit more. We've had a couple of to's and fro's, as is always the case with this sort of thing, between the reality and the CAD. Sitting in the car, checking the pedal alignments, checking the steering column alignment. We've made an adjustment to the steering column alignment now and moved where the steering column's going through the bulkhead, which we're hoping now we've got reasonably well set up. I won't show you now because it won't really mean a lot sort of individually to show you at the moment, but once we've got the steering column mounted, I can show you that. We're using a Jag X300 column, which I've mentioned before, but we're mounting it a little bit higher at the front and bringing it through slightly more horizontal now. We've realised the steering wheel had become too vertical in its plane, but too heavily angled, which was not feeling right. So we've done a bit of a revisit of that and realigned things, and now we've got it through on a much nicer angle, much happier with the driving position. So Luke's carrying on with the CAD now, getting the bulkhead area designed, getting all that finalised, so Matt can make the upper bulkhead in the sheet metal. Once we've got the upper bulkhead in the sheet metal, we can finalise both the footwells and get the reinforcement into the footwells. At that point, it is actually capable of coming off the jig, but obviously I want it on the jig to do the front panel first and get all that sorted out, and the inner splash shields and the mountings for the front panel, etc. So yeah, it's getting close to that stage. So that's where we're at with all that. Moving on from that, we have the roll cage, which I've been working on, and we had a couple of 2 steps forward, 1 step back on that. Had a bit of a review of how some of the bits worked, but I'm now as happy as I'm ever going to be with the roll cage. I think it's the closest fitting cage I've ever made, and it's pretty challenging to do, I have to say. I've been doing a bit and then stepping away from it for a little bit, and then doing a bit and then stepping away, because you just go blind and chase your tail on this sort of job sometimes, thinking you can get it better and better and better when you just can't. The challenge has been, and this, I think I've mentioned this before, but it would be no easier done with a CNC tube bender. It's very tempting to say, well, we'll just scan the car, draw the cage in CAD, and then get it CNC bent. Well, that's fine. But the CNC bender, unless I'm going to be enlightened by a viewer telling me otherwise, can't do a completely even roll on the tube. It can only put bends in. So a curve would have to be done as a series of bends, which then doesn't look very clean and tidy. Whereas on this, I've actually put these curves in as rolls, and not the same roll, a progressive roll as well, because the curvature of the roof is not a continuous curve. So that's actually done as a varying roll from front to back. So there's a roll that way in the above door tube to follow this profile of the roof, which increases in radius at the back. Sorry, decreases in radius, tightens up at the back. And then there's a bend obviously at the top of the screen pillar, and then there's a roll that way in this pillar to follow the curvature of that pillar, which curves outwards like that. Then when it gets to the bottom of that pillar, then there's another bend to kick the tube back in to the dash area, and then that's going to be fabricated into a box that's part of the end of the dashboard, which is why that tube appears shorter than that. That's going to actually land in a box in the end of the dash, and then also tie into the dash support tube, which we've got to add. Currently working on the dash, on the screen top tube. The main hoop is as tight to everything as I can get it. I can't go any tighter to the roof and still be capable of getting a headlining in. The top tube is rolled to follow the profile of the roof within a couple of millimeters. That follows the same profile as the top of the roof, so if you look through the car, that follows through. This is basically a 9mm to 10mm gap all the way down the B pillar between that and that, and that'll be cased in at the bottom with the reinforcement gusset that boxes that area in. These are just tacks in at the minute, obviously. They're just tacking it, but we've got a 3/8 inch thick steel block tacked between the cage. Actually, yes, it is 3/8 inch steel block tacked between the cage and the car at the top, both sides. So that gap's exactly the same. The gap up here is exactly the same. The gap down there is exactly the same. The angle is exactly the same, and it's level. The top tube's level to the chassis within 1mm across the car. I can't get it much more accurate than that. Certainly not with a manual bender. That is pretty challenging. So I'm pretty pleased with where that's at. We've basically got the 2 rear stays to go in, which are a very lightly curved tube that goes from the back of where the front leg meets the main hoop down to a buttress that we're putting in at the end of the parcel shelf where the C pillar meets the parcel shelf. So we're going to put a buttress in down there to just spread the load back into the shell there. And then, yeah, the screen top bar, which is fairly conventional, that's relatively straightforward. That's a bar with a bend each end, which is pretty straightforward. We were going to roll that one, and actually looking at it, for the profile and the area it goes in and how straight that section of the roof is in the plane at which you're going to view it, it makes more sense to do it as a straight tube with a bend each end to kick it upwards than it does to do it as a rolled tube. So that's where we're at on that. What I will just quickly elaborate on as a quick nat aside, I'm making Jamie's life really hard here, but it's over on top of my toolbox. I'll just show you something. I get asked a little bit about fish mouthing tubes and how it's done. And there's a lot of waffle in the world about fish mouthing tubes, and there's about 100 different machines and things you can buy that on the face of it seem like a really good idea for fish mouthing a piece of tube. I don't use any of those. I've people ask me this a fair bit away from the internet, just people I know, friends that mess around and work on cars, and how do you do your tube fish mounting? What tool have you got? I've got a cold saw sat over there, which is just a saw that I can alter the miter angle of, and I've got a program which you can find on the internet the same as I can, called Tube Miter. tubemiter.exe. If you Google that, you will find it lurking in the back of somebody's website, and I can't even remember who, as a zip file, as a suspicious looking zip file, to be honest, and I don't think it's even hosted properly anymore. It's ancient. It works. It's literally a Visual Basic program with about 10 lines of code, I think. It's the most crude thing you've ever seen, but it just works. You put in the tube diameter that you're trying to miter, the tube diameter that you're mitering it to, the included angle between them, and the wall thickness for the two tubes, and it comes out with a piece of paper like that, which prints. And any time I've ever printed that on any printer ever, however badly set up the printer, it always prints to scale. How the man who wrote this program has achieved that, I don't know, but it always prints exactly to scale on any printer. You then cut that out, roll it up around your piece of tube, and it gives you the fish mouth. Obviously that's a straight one, so very straightforward. You then slide that onto the end of the piece of tube. Stay there, Jamie, I'll go and get the bit of tube. So you slide that onto the end of your piece of tube and mark a line on round it, which all of this takes seconds to do. Slide it on, mark the line on round it, and that gets you the end like that. And then all you do to do that is put that in your chop saw and make two 45-degree cuts, or whatever angled cuts. Basically 2 cuts in a cold saw or any sort of chop saw will get you 90% to that fish mouth you've marked out. Then you just do the tiny final bit with a grinder. But I could fish mouth the end of one of these tubes by printing that off, putting it on there, marking it, cutting it, and then finishing it with a grinder, including the printing time and the putting the numbers in time. If I've got my laptop down here, I can probably do that in 2 minutes, probably no more, to do the whole job from start to finish on a known angle. Obviously sometimes you don't know the angle exactly and it takes a bit longer, but it's faster than trying to do it on one of those blooming grinders. Those the fish mouth grinders, yeah, they're great for doing high angles, but even then I would still just mark it on using because obviously the cold saw will only go to 45 degrees, so you're a bit limited on the fish mouth angle that you can put on. But if it's a very shallow angle, I would just mark it on and then feed the tube through the vertical bandsaw to cut it. Those grinders make an immense amount of mess, use very expensive abrasive belts, make an immense amount of noise. It's just a horrendously messy, ridiculous way of achieving a fish mouth, in my opinion. Sanding the whole lot out of the end of the tube is just a real sledgehammer to crack a nut solution when you just want to make 2 cuts and then tidy it up with a grinder. Much simpler. So that's how I do fish mouths on tube. I mark it out, make 2 cuts on a saw, tidy it up with a grinder, and it fits every time. So tubemiter.exe, Google that. You will find that program. It's the best program ever. Dead straightforward, really simple. Few lines, few numbers put in, and it comes out with something that helps you mark a tube out. So that's that. I think that's probably where we're going to leave off on Aston Martin. I won't go into any more detail. There's various other things going on, like removing some jig mounts and moving things around and shuffling stuff so Matt can make the... Oh no, hang on. I've missed a key thing here, sorry. Missed a very important thing, waffling on about roll cages. Floor pans. Matt's working on the floor pans. We moved the jig mounts, well Matt's moved the front mounts to the jig. He has made some new ones that fit further forward, taken the weight off the car slightly so he could get the other big jig beam mount out and then drop the car back onto his new front mounts so that he's got access in there to be able to make the floor pans. He's made the passenger side floor pan and he's now making the driver's side floor pan, which has a drop section for your heel area to give the a slightly better angle of approach to the pedal pads. Just makes your footwell area a little bit more comfortable and the pedal feel a bit better. He's added these beads or flutes into the floor pan on the Pals machine to add some stiffness into it and some reinforcements into it, and done a really nice job on these. Also extremely fast job. I mean, he did the other one of these yesterday afternoon in about 3 hours probably, and he's done this one this morning in similar, maybe a little bit longer than that, but not a lot longer than that. He's got them pretty much there or thereabouts, and then they'll be going into the car. This one will be going into the car. They'll be screwed in, checked, and then fully welded in. So yeah, the floor pans are also coming along very well. So this is really starting to look quite like a car, and we're getting pretty happy with the situation and the progress on it. And everything's coming together really well. Then, moving on from that, we have the body shop, which is not really such a body shop this week. It's actually turned into a strip down shop. We have many pairs of hands in here at the minute, but we have Project Pancetta, a very good one actually. We have a Fiat Dino, and this is more of a straightforward restoration than we would normally be undertaking. I can't actually remember what year this is, but it's a Fiat Dino. It's around 1970. They made them from 66 to 73. Is it 72? Ah, there we go. It's a late one because it's a 2.4, so it's a late one. So it's got the Ferrari 2400 V6 in it, basically the same engine as was in a 12 valve Lancia Stratos. So Ferrari V6, ZF gearbox, independent rear end, very nice car, good fun to drive car, nice looking car, typical Italian late 60s, early 70s, my favourite era of car really. This one hasn't entirely dissolved. We will hold judgment on how badly dissolved it is once it's been blasted, but outward impressions are not too badly dissolved. It's had some bumps, it's led a bit of a life. There's definitely some evidence of some repairs in the past. We've got some photographic evidence of it having some sort of light restoration in the past. It's been painted. It's obviously it's not a all original car, but it also does look pretty decent. It's a pretty good basis to work from. So this is currently in the strip down and encapsulate all the information stage, so that we know where all the bits are, what bits need replacing, what bits might be able to be used again. Hopefully quite a lot on this, because the parts availability on these is pretty poor. And then this will be going through restoration largely as standard in terms of the body, with some choice upgrades. So the engine's going to see some upgrades. Exactly what those are is yet to be determined. The very extreme example would be going to 24 valve, but I'm not so sure we'll be doing that. That's a pretty costly option, although it is possible because the cylinder heads are available now. Or simply going to fuel injection, a basic rebuild. The engine does need a rebuild, so fuel injection on a rebuilt engine, just making it nice and good fun for the road. What's that? 92. Oh yeah, 92. Yes, that's a good point. Guys, it just reminded me, we've got the paperwork for an engine rebuild that was done on this in 1992. Now, I'm not sure on my currency. I'm going to be mocked by our viewers for not knowing what the currency of the Netherlands was prior to euro, but I can't actually remember what currency the Netherlands used before the euro. I kept thinking krona, but I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure, but anyway, here we go. I'll stand to be corrected and mocked here. But the invoice for the engine rebuild was 15,000, whatever that currency was, in 1992, which sounds like quite a lot of money. Which I imagine it was quite a lot of money, because I don't think there were ever cheap engines to rebuild. But yes, it was rebuilt in 1992. However, it has all the signs of being quite poorly again now. The oil analysis for it came back as being an insignificant content of bearing, crankshaft and piston material. And block material, so it's definitely poorly and needs a rebuild of some sort. So we'll get into that and get that stripped down, and you'll be along with us for the ride on that to see what that's going on. The gearbox we'll have rebuild as a matter of course. That'll be going up to that's an easy decision. That's already decided on. That's going to go to Martin Jones MJT to be rebuilt, as he's kind of the man when it comes to ZFs. He's got more bits for ZF gearboxes than anybody else in the world, I should imagine, other than maybe ZF themselves, but possibly even more than them. So that's going to go up to Martin Jones. He'll rebuild the ZF. We'll probably do the engine. I think that's the plan. We'll rebuild the diff. That's all the mechanical stuff. Rebuild the body shell, obviously. We'll find out what that amounts to in terms of rust. Anything that needs replacing, we're likely to need to have to make, because I don't think there's any real panel availability for these, though again, please correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then we'll be doing a nice restoration upgrade little bit type job on this one. Not a full crazy build, just a nice upgrade restoration. So really looking forward to that one, because it kind of fits into the mix of slightly less intensive engineering on this one than some of the others, and it'll be nice to get a car completed in a slightly shorter time scale than some of our others, hopefully, optimistically. Be nice to. I've ruined it now, haven't I? That's on that bombshell. I'm going to hand over to Carl, because that's basically, I've just now made this car entirely made of rust by saying that.
as well.
Yes, I was just thinking that. My other bold statement of the past when I said that about an FJ Land Cruiser that turned out to be largely made of rust, that didn't appear to be when we first got it. So anyway, from the rust room, I'm going to hand over to Cal and let him take you through the assembly shop.
Thank you very much, Nat, and welcome back to the assembly shop. And I'm going to start with this absolute thing of beauty, Project Portofino, the XJ Coupe that we're working on at the moment. Firstly, I'm going to mention we had the customer for this car down today to go over some design details. I was actually asked the other day how much involvement customers typically want, and it actually varies massively. Some people come multiple times during the course of the build to discuss all sorts of details and love to come in and see the cars. And we've done cars where the customer has never been to the workshop throughout the entire build. So it does range a lot, and the amount of input they like to have ranges a lot. And actually this chap has got a very specific eye for design detail in a way that I like. I love bashing the ideas back and forward and kind of homing in on the ideal solution. It's quite a good dynamic actually, and he was here today. We were in the meeting room just with projecting the laptop onto the screen so we could go over predominantly the dash design, which we were like 95% there. We just wanted to get the exact switch layout. There was a few things that needed finalising on it. So he's been here, we're pretty much there with that. Luke's now going to do a revised set of renders for the dash, so I can propose that. I imagine there'll probably be one more round of changes from that, and then we'll be in a position to actually start making some of the dash fascia components, because this car is just all about subtle details and just classy design. You know, it's just not going to shout modified car in any way whatsoever, which I like. And then in terms of physical work on the car, fuel system's been going together. So these run twin fuel tanks in this quarter panel area here, which is kind of outside of the boot, behind the quarter panel, and then there's like a sort of removable bulkhead panel that seals off the quarter panel down here and basically separates the area of the quarter that's effectively outside the car with the fuel tank in from the bit of the quarter that's inside the car with the rear window in. Now, we have edited the way the fuel system works on this. Traditionally there's two tanks, they both feed two separate pumps in the boot which you can switch between, and you have a switch that switches between the fuel gauge between the two tanks. So basically you independently fill the tanks as standard, you use the switch to be able to see how much fuel is in each tank, and you switch the pump accordingly to the tank you want to take fuel from. Now, we did this on a previous XJC build, and we've done the same on this, in that we've modified the tanks to have a very large bore AN pipe running across here. I don't know if it's actually there at the minute. There's probably a bit of it here. If I can thread it out to show you. Probably not. There we go. That's half of it. So it's got heat protection on it because it runs over where the exhaust comes through. But that joins to the other tank on the other side, and it means you can basically fill both tanks from either side. So it doesn't matter which side of the fuel pumps you fill up at. You fill one side and it tops both tanks simultaneously, and then that's teed together to this Holly lift pump in the boot here, which is then feeding this Fitech sort of anti-surge reservoir that has an integrated high pressure pump inside it and the fuel pressure regulator on it as well, so such that we only then need a single pipe going to the fuel rail. So we're going to run a dead end fuel line, dead end fuel rail should I say, with a single fuel line, because the regulator just recirculates directly back into the reservoir. And what that essentially does is just mean that that reservoir is always full, it's always being kept full by the lift pump, and it just alleviates any risk of fuel surge when the fuel is relatively empty and sloshing around in the tanks. And then there will be a breather, which will actually be on the neck. It is originally on the neck, so we're doing a revised neck, and our breather pipe comes out as it does originally through this little hole at the front here. Now originally that more or less just comes straight out and down to the ground, but because of our revised fuel setup, there is the risk that if you park the car on quite a significant sideways slope immediately after having filled it with fuel, you could get quite a lot of fuel coming out of one of the breathers. So we wanted to run them up higher before they go down towards the ground. That's something that George Sinclair's been working on today. So where these bulkhead plates sit in here and separate the sort of outside from the inside, we've put some bulkhead fittings through those such that we can then run the fuel vent pipe right up the C-pillar, a loop at the top of the C-pillar and back down again, and then back into the outside area and down to the ground, such that you would need the fuel level to be basically up towards the top of the C-pillar before you actually started siphoning fuel out of the vent pipe. So that's all taking shape pretty nicely. The fuel tanks are new tanks that were available, and we've done some modifications. As I said, we've welded in bigger unions for the link pipe that runs across them. We've changed the thread on one of the fittings at the bottom where our fuel return goes to, such that it's a more normal thread, because they're a very strange thread size on those tanks. And then we've blocked up an additional fitting near the top of the tank, which is now redundant. Pressure tested those. We also, in the process of pressure testing, made the little blanking piece that blanks where the fuel sender goes, which is just in behind the light here. So we can pressure test everything. We know they're not going to leak once they're actually in the car. So they are pretty much ready to go in. You've just got to refit those bulkhead panels, make sure they're totally sealed, run the pipe up the pillar. We can get the tanks in, and then the necks later go in and socket in with an O-ring fitting into the top of the tank there. So yes, fuel system is starting to go together on that. The subframes are starting to go together. So Mark's now, he was sort of demasking everything after powder coat last week. He's now putting poly bushes in things, so that all the front wishbones are going to be poly bushed. We're going to mount the subframes to the body on rubber bushes still, but the wishbones to the subframe on poly, just to stiffen everything up, but still keep the isolation of road noise good. And then we've just sent off the diff and the rear hub carriers to Simply Performance. We've done all the surface finishing processes on those parts, but we're sending them to them so they can set up the preload on the bearings, set up the bearings and the crown wheel and pinion in the diff, and basically do all the stuff that takes that would be best with some specialist knowledge. Then they'll send those bits back to us. We'll then build the subframes up, and then that lot can go in the car. And in the meantime, the engine is also in progress. So the block has now gone to Cylinder Rebores, which is the company we use locally for engine block machining. They're currently will be machining out the original cylinder liners to replace them. So they're basically new liners back to the original bore size, so we can use standard size pistons, because that's all that's available. And the gearbox, I think all gears who have been doing that have finished that now. So hopefully any day soon we'll have that gearbox back. And actually in reasonably quick succession, we should have the subframes built up, the gearbox back, and actually not too far after that, potentially the engine starting to come together. So very exciting times, and it was so for the customer as well, because it's the first time he'd seen it painted. Interceptor, a few bits going on that. Last week, George was working on the A-pillar trims. So we sent all of the bright work away to be polished if it was stainless, chromed if it was chromed at Derby Plating. The A-pillar trims, we originally made some up on the car that were the ones that came with it, and they were stainless steel. But we weren't very happy with the surface finish, and they'd been kind of work hardened to the point it was very difficult to take them much further. So we decided to get some brass ones, some original brass ones, and do the same modifications to the brass ones, because it's much easier to work with when it comes to ironing out any imperfections when you're trying to refold the edges, which is what we had to do on those. So that's now done. He's really happy with the fit of those, so that they can now join the rest of the parts that are at Derby Plating, and that's everything then in terms of bright work for that. And then the rear end, so if you remember last week, I think it was, or the week before, slightly frustratingly, we realised once the slightly cheap diff components had been replaced for genuine strange parts, this front part of the casing specifically, that some of the strengthening ribs were slightly different to the kind of cheap copy version that the car had come to us with, and actually the brake calipers, or the handbrake calipers, fouled that, and also the brackets for the main brake calipers weren't really suitable in the way they were designed to have some studs pressed into them, but you couldn't really get the calipers onto those studs. It just wasn't a very nice arrangement. So we've modified the diff casing slightly now, repainted that all fits perfectly. And then Toby has machined up some really nice press-in kind of top hat threaded spacers now that press into these original caliper brackets, but in turn have a thread in them rather than a plain hole for pushing a stud into. So we can mount those calipers acceptably, and then for the second time, but now hopefully the final time, this can go into the car. And in the meantime, we are awaiting feedback from Nitron on a remake of the dampers that it came with of a higher quality. So it's all kind of going in the direction of being rolling. Brake plumbing is going to be one of the next things. As soon as that's in, start looking at the brake plumbing. Toby's already started making up some of the hoses. Also the handbrake mechanism, he's been fitting up the e-stop electric handbrake actuator that we're using and the cables, so as soon as this goes in they can just be connected up and that's ready to go. A lot of that sort of provision was made at dry build, so it should go together reasonably quickly. So that's where we're at on that. And then the beautiful Project Churchill. Largely Steve working on this at the minute, gearing up to have the wiring loom done. So he's laying out a rope loom, so essentially a mock-up of how the wiring harness will be routed through the car in rope and labelled on all the ends, and that's based on a list I've already made, which is a list of every electrical component that's going to go into the car. That also is populated with all the connector detail, although he doesn't need that at the minute. So the stage 2 after I've done that is laying out this rope loom. I'll then check I'm happy with all of that. As soon as we're happy with all the lengths, we'll pull that back out of the car. We'll do a dimension diagram of that, and then I'll send all that information over to Max at Bremax, who's going to be doing the wiring loom on this car, so he can then do the final design for that loom. I'll okay that, and then he'll get it in manufacture. So I would say we should get that probably in around a month's time, maybe a little bit more, and that should coincide pretty nicely with the interior progress, which I will let James and probably Luke also, because he's been doing some CAD related stuff on this, I'll let them elaborate a little bit more on that. Just before we hand over to Luke though, I'm going to touch briefly on the Morris. So the main thing on that is that I went out for a test drive in it this week, which is what it's been waiting on. The guys did a modification to make the exhaust quieter, which you'd have seen in a previous episode. And what was the other thing I wanted to check? Suspension. Quite a while ago we swapped the springs on it when it first came back here, because one of the requests by the owner of that car was that it was a little bit firm on the ride, so we changed the springs around to make it about 15% softer. We also made a modification to the power steering reservoir cap, because it was just blowing a little bit of oil out of the breather on the cap. Now we'd already designed a little metal shield that went in there to sort of deflect the return oil away from the cap, but we've now put a little bronze sintered filter in a revised version of that shield to try and knock back any oil coming out of that vent at all. So I took that for a test drive. I have to say I was absolutely blown away by how good that thing is to drive. It's been a while since I drove it before, and I think the tweaks that we've done now have taken it from being exceptionally good to just being, I know I would say this, but it's astonishingly good to drive. The ride is just so unintrusive. It feels very planted and performance car-like, but without any kind of harshness or jolting or, none of the things you would even really associate with a sort of modern performance car. So happy with that. The oil situation on the breather seems to have been sorted, so that's great. And the exhaust as well is really been improved. So realistically, the vast bulk of what you can hear when you're driving that car now is induction noise, and that's, to me, is a pretty pleasant sound. So yeah, I'm so happy with everything on that. Fed that all back to the customer. He's given me a couple of other little things, wanted a locking fuel cap on it and a few other minor details, no pun intended. But that should be going back to him hopefully next week, which will be this week actually if you're watching the video on Sunday. So yeah, all good. On that note, I'm going to hand over to the CAD Den to see what they've been up to.
Hi guys, and welcome back to this week's CAD creation. It's been a very interior heavy week for me. Kind of mostly pushing along with stuff around this side of the building, or technically around that side of the building, but stuff that I've designed previously and kind of now needs to come into fruition. Helping Scott a lot in terms of creating tools for cutouts on the carbon dash and the E-Type. So there are two screens, one which has a flip-up mechanism and one that is like permanently visible on that car. Both of them need cutouts in the dash. Obviously that's an incredibly scary thing to do because it's a lot of money and you are literally cutting a massive hole in it. So I've done a tool which essentially conforms to the shape of the dash itself. That allows it to basically, hopefully anyway, borderline no room for error, because if it literally slots into the shape of it's my design. If it literally slots into the shape of the dash, there is no room for it to go up, down, left and right, basically. Along with that, you've got stuff like the gear shifter cutout. It is an automatic, but obviously you have the different modes of automatic, and then also the ability to shift it right towards you, and then also manually shift it up and down, almost like a sequential sort of action. So I've done the screen cutout tools. I want to make a quick edit to the gear shifter cutout tool, print that off, and then he'll have all the things that he needs to be able to get started on that. Then moving across, staying in the metal workshop, moving across back to the DBS, I kind of sort of have a finalized design for the upper bulkhead, and then the next step after that in that sort of region was mounting the steering column. Because the original had a floor mounted pedal box and we've changed it to have a Jaguar top mounted pedal box, we kind of had to do a little bit of thinking around where the steering column is going to go, where that path that shoots from the steering wheel basically back through the bulkhead is going to go. And to do that, we almost, what's the best way of explaining this? Ages ago, I sent the client some renders of the interior design, so the dash design and the center console design. There were some features of that which he really, really liked, one of which was the ability to have the center console almost sweep under the dash. I had certain concerns now that we've done the H-rack and we've done the H-bar, which kind of is the main support of that bulkhead, and we've now got that all in the car in its correct position, that I wouldn't be able to sweep the dash under enough and clear all of that stuff and still be able to have the center console sweep underneath that. So I spent a little bit of time basically just modeling the dash, still pretty much entirely based off of how the original one looked, because we really like that. The proportions of it are lovely. There's certain design features of that which we think are really cool, but it's going to have to be a slightly different shape to what the original was to be able to kind of conform with all the work that we're doing. So I did that over Tuesday basically and a little bit of yesterday, and showed that to Cal. He was really happy with that, and then from that point forward I was able to, between looking at how the original steering wheel was set up versus the measurements that we took with the client when he was here, get a steering wheel location, shoot a beam back from that, and kind of come up with a plan for that steering column mounting system and where that's going to run. To do that, I'm going to have to edit where the pedal box sits, just literally shifting over a little bit so the steering column hits it, but I've done those changes. I'm about to go plasma cut that panel now, and that's looking really good. That also means that because I was like, well, if I'm modelling the dash, I might as well model it in a way which we could actually use to construct it later on. It means that I'm a little bit ahead with the dash design. I want to get a little bit further with that, model the center console largely based off what the client liked and the notes that he gave us off the last one, and then send him a couple of renders and everything, make sure that he's happy with the path that we're going down. And then that moves a lot further along in that kind of interior design process to actually having that being able to be made in the car as well, which is all around good. And I think that's it for the DBS, I want to say. And so moving on to the last thing that I've been doing, which is Churchill, handed over, I think in last week's video I said that I handed over the door card that I did to James. He's done a fantastic job of trimming that. I also gave him the patterns for the other door card, which he has now cut out for me and I think is downstairs. So today at some point I'm going to go put that in the car, scan it, because the door cards do conform to the shape of the door. And when I do the blocks, the 3D printed blocks that go onto them, I don't want them to be flat. I want them to, the back of it to conform to the shape of the door as well. So then I can mirror over the design, tweak it to fit, and then cut that by that plane as well. Make that, hand that back over to James, finalize roof trims, and then continue with that process as well. But yeah, so very busy week, but we're getting through it. I'm having a lot of fun doing it all. So yeah, thanks guys. I think George is, at the minute, battling licenses for different things. We're trialing different scanners, a different CAD program, and George is basically doing a fantastic job of trying to figure out the best way to move forward with the exterior design stuff. It's a big process.
A bit of holiday is what's actually happened, but...
Yeah, but since you've been back from holiday... Okay, the one day that he's been back, he's been doing a fantastic job of trying to figure out the best way to go forward from this point forward. As our projects get a little bit more complex, as we start doing more exterior design sort of stuff, there are certain limitations of Fusion 360 and the scanning software and equipment that we have. So I think you would have heard us mention a while ago that we trialed a new scanner. George was playing around with that program a little bit, and there are definitely some perks of it. There are some things which need a bit of learning and all of this sort of stuff as well. But unfortunately, yeah, we have now run out of the license, but it's okay. They have said that we can have it back for a little bit. So we're just waiting on that to happen. And then I think after that, after he's finished kind of the front end setup, the intercooler setup, all of that sort of stuff. Of the Saab. He should be heading back onto the simmer to design stuff, which is really exciting because that car is going to be mega. I cannot wait to see that kind of start coming together. But yeah, thanks guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much, guys. And I'm now going to hand over to the actuals den to see what's going on down there, and I will catch you guys next week. See you then.
Hey, welcome back to the den. It's me. I am back from my holidays in the south of France, where it was lovely and sunny, back in Leicestershire in the rain. Happy days. Really quick one. We have the ex-traffic police car Volvo back for a couple of extra bits, split boost hose and some other bits and bobs. Evo, which is here, is basically done now. And has had new catalytic converter on it for the MOT, so it's got a legit MOT, and that is now for sale. So if you like a bit of Evo estate, get in touch, that is for sale. Mercedes, this is the first time I've seen this on the floor with the new wheels, the split rim look wheels with those cool chunky tyres and on the lowering springs as well. And I think it looks fantastic. The wheels and tyres to me are much more in proportion to the rest of the size of the car, because it is an enormous car based on the S-Class floor, and I think these 17s with that tyre I think look absolutely spot on, so I'm very pleased with that, and I know our lovely customer is also very pleased and very happy with that. So the wood veneer is now dropped off with Martin Bespoke, who are going to repair and renew the veneer on this for us. We looked at changing to a new wood, but ultimately the cost was more than the customer wanted to spend, so we're just repairing the veneer that's there. So that is now with them finally to get on with that. Luke's shown you bits under the engine with the intake and so on, so I think that covers everything on the Merc, but yeah, really pleased with how that looks. I think it looks fantastic. MGF, loads of really good visual progress on MGF. So last week you'd have seen the engine, everything was getting reassembled into the subframe. That, as you can see, is now all back in the car. Owen and Matt and now Luke are firing into this. We've got loads of bits, had a load of more bits arrive this morning. So they're getting all the rear suspension back on. All the bushes that we were missing, the last couple of bits and bobs are going on. The rear brakes, which the customer bought quite a long time ago from BG Developments, the excellent BG Developments, the spacing on the rear caliper bracket wasn't quite right, so we're just sending those back. They're going to alter those and get those back on, and we're hoping to have this run up, what are we today, Thursday? Yeah, hopefully have it run up tomorrow, which would be fantastic. And depending on how we get on with drive shafts, which are being refurbished, maybe next week we can see it driving, which would be fantastic. So very happy with that. In the detailing bay, you will have seen we've got the Retropower Camaro Project Starvague. Thanks, Luke. Which I'm not really seeing it properly close up. And as usual, I mean, it's just utterly stunning, I think. There's not anything I don't like about it. I know there were some comments about number plates and stuff on it, but I don't know, to my eye I think it looks perfect. I love the wheels, I love the colour, I love the bonnet pins, I love the kind of exit ducty bit on the bonnet, and oh yes, 100%. And the noise is just perfect, I love it. It's so Porsche, you'd have seen, so that's all been detailed. We are just trying to manage having the instrument cluster repaired. So These have 3 separate LCD displays for the speedo and other information on the bottom of the instrument cluster, and there's a little filament bulb behind each, and they have no power basically. So we've just been trying to understand whether that is a chassis side thing or an instrument cluster thing. We're fairly sure it's an instrument cluster thing. So we've sent that off to a specialist to be investigated and hopefully be repaired. And then that'll be good to go back to the customer, which is fantastic. I know he's looking forward to getting it back. Then the Lexus, loads of really good progress on the Lexus. So we've had all the Xylan parts back, which have been coated. They look amazing as always. And the guys are starting to get all the suspension bits back on. So we've got a lot of that on. Having a chat yesterday with a customer about the infotainment, which is the next thing we're going to be looking at. So these have a pop-up screen on the top of the dash, which I think I mentioned a while ago is just quite dated now, because that technology moves on so fast, it just feels really dated. So we're going to look at having a screen in there with Apple CarPlay and incorporate all that. So I'm talking to a guy about that at the moment to find the best solution for that. That's kind of it at the moment. We've got other things which are kind of stalled a little bit, waiting for bits, just with me being away and stuff like that. A couple of things have stalled a little bit. The BMW we're waiting for some bits on that are on order. Top secret project is going along, so there's been a bit of time on that, and very excitingly I have a conversation this afternoon with Mr. Porter, who owns the MG Metro Turbo, about a plan of action for that. So I'm hoping that next week we'll be having some news on that we're starting to crack on, and we'll do some deep dives into the Metro Turbo. I think for now that is all from me, so it's lovely to be back despite the weather, and I shall hand you upstairs to James. See you next time.
Hi, welcome back to the trim shop. This week I have mainly been on Churchill, so we got the 3D printed parts from CAD. So beginning of the week, sanded them, filled them, got them all flat to a point where I'm happy with them. And then bottom piece is covered. Just been waiting on this piece, a few more bits, and then I patterned it yesterday and Ellie has top sewed it this morning. So that's got the nice coppery orange stitch to match the rear door cards and the seats that Richard did, so that's all good. Hopefully get that laid on there today and maybe get it on the car and see what it looks like. So that's looking really nice, really happy with how that's come out. It's going to have like a cool coppery speaker grille, so bring some colour to it, which would be nice. Rear seats, I've got a bit further with the rear seats, so I've sculpted them, tidied them up a little bit, given them a bit of extra padding just to lose the marks where I've sanded it and just cut into it with the foam cutter. Same as the rears, I've added an inch to the top, so that's all good. On the rears as well, we now have this hook in there, so we can hook it at the top like we said, and the 2 bolts, so that will be okay to fix that in. And then I have been on the Camaro downstairs, so I've just made a new gaiter for that. Just it was a bit tight, so Cal said just to make another one, so I've done that. A few cool little inserts for the phone charger in the middle, and just some overmats, so when it goes to the show he's not going to trash the carpet that was there. And yeah, that's good for me, so I'll hand over to Ellie. Here she is.
Hi, Ellie here. Thanks, James. This week I have been doing the door cards for the Churchill project. We've done the twin needling around this little gap here, which is going to sit really nicely like that once it's all done. It was a bit difficult because we've had to do them both singularly as 2 rows rather than with a twin needle machine where it would just flow round together. As well as that, I have been patterning the seats. So we've made a little mock cover for it, we've popped a fly on it to pull it in and give it the finished look we want. We've made some adjustments to the pattern, just taking bits out so it's not got too much material in it. And my next mission is to start marking that in the actual leather and crack on with sewing it. As well as that, this week I have been doing some little bits for the Camaro downstairs. I did the new gaiter and I bound the mats for it, and they're looking really good. That's about it from me. Thank you. I'm gonna hand back to Nick.
So thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned next week and we'll see you then. Have yourselves a lovely week. Bye bye.